For about 40 years, the US-Japan alliance was this absolute bedrock of global stability. It was simple, it was clear, and it just worked. But then, almost overnight, the entire world it was built for, well, it just vanished. This threw two of the world's most powerful nations into a huge identity crisis. Okay, let's dive into exactly how that happened.
And really, it all comes down to this one simple question. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the whole reason for the US-Japan Security Treaty kind of just disappeared. So what was left? You had a military superpower and an economic titan suddenly looking at each other across the Pacific and asking a really awkward question. So, what now?
To really get why the 90s were such a shock, you first have to appreciate the beautifully simple deal that defined the decades before. It was a classic Cold War bargain, right? An unspoken arrangement that just made perfect sense for everyone involved.
And here's the deal, laid out plain and simple. The US brought the muscle. It was the military shield keeping the Soviet Union in check and anchoring its power in Asia from these super critical bases on Japanese soil. And in exchange? Well, Japan got to focus on just one thing, its economy. It became an absolute global powerhouse, all while keeping its own defense spending tiny and basically outsourcing its security to Washington. It was a perfect trade, as long as the big scary enemy was right there at the gates.
But then, the enemy left. And in just a couple of dizzying years, two huge global events didn't just crack the foundation of this bargain, they completely blew it wide open.
I mean, just look at how fast this all happened. In '89, the Berlin Wall falls. Bam! The Cold War is pretty much over. Just a year later, a totally new kind of war kicks off in the Persian Gulf. And by '91, the Soviet Union isn't just weak, it's gone. Poof! In the span of about 24 months, everything they knew just evaporated, and the alliance was left staring at this new, messy, and totally unfamiliar world.
So, faced with the Gulf War, Japan responded the only way it really knew how. It opened its wallet and wrote a check. A massive one, for $13 billion. This was Japan's big answer to the crisis, a huge financial contribution to the war effort. But they were about to learn a very harsh lesson.
This quote from a report back then, it just says it all, doesn't it? The world wasn't impressed by the money. Japan got accused of checkbook diplomacy, basically paying other people to do the dirty work. And this just brutally illustrates the realization that was hitting Tokyo. Your economic might means very little when the world is looking for partners with boots on the ground.
So here's the crucial takeaway. The war exposed what people started calling Japan's abnormality. Here you have the second largest economy on the entire planet, an industrial giant, but on the world stage it was a political lightweight, totally constrained by its post-war peace constitution. This jarring disconnect set off a deep, deep national identity crisis.
And this wasn't just some political squabble, This was a genuine soul-searching. Japan was standing at a fork in the road, trying to figure out its own identity, with three radically different ideas about what the nation should actually become.
You can basically see the three camps that formed. First, you had the establishment, the mainstreamers. They wanted to stick with the US, but find cautious new ways to help out, like in UN peacekeeping. Then you had the nationalists, who were arguing it was time to tear up the old rules, rewrite the constitution, and build a real military to become a truly normal country. And on the complete other side, you had the pacifists, who believed Japan should double down on peace, maybe even end the US alliance entirely.
The mainstreamers, they tried to thread the needle with this really clever idea called active pacifism. The logic was basically, okay, let's not break the peace constitution, but maybe we can bend it a little. They wanted to reinterpret it to allow Japanese personnel to join UN peacekeeping missions. The goal was simple. Finally put boots on the ground, but for peace, and prove that Japan could contribute more than just cash.
Now, while all of this is happening in Japan, a completely different but just as important realization was dawning in Washington. That clean, neat line they had always drawn between being security partners and being economic competitors, well, that line was starting to get very, very blurry.
For decades, the US basically saw Japan as two different things: a military ally you help arm, and an economic rival you have to beat. But in the 90s, they realized it was all connected. Sharing advanced military technology with their ally could actually end up strengthening their biggest commercial competitor. The two issues weren't separate anymore, they were the same thing. So to really get this shift, you have to understand the traditional American model, spin-off. The idea was the Pentagon pours billions into defense research, and then all this brilliant new tech, like semiconductors or even the internet, would eventually spin off into the commercial world. This created huge industries and gave the US a massive edge.
But Japan had mastered the complete reverse, spin-on. Its commercial industries, especially in electronics, were so advanced and so efficient that their civilian technology could actually be adapted for military use. This was a total game changer. It meant Japan's consumer electronics mastery was now a major strategic asset, one that could potentially let them build better, cheaper military hardware than even the Pentagon could.
So you've got both countries totally in flux. Japan is searching for a new role, and America is rethinking this entire economic security balance. A 1993 report tried to map out where this was all going, and it laid out 4 possible paths for the alliance, and one fundamental nagging question.
And these potential futures were all over the map. Maybe nothing really changes, and you just get a Pax Americana Phase 2, where Japan keeps paying the bills. Or maybe they evolve into a true two-headed partnership, a bigamy. A third option saw a much messier world of shifting alliances. And then there was the most radical vision of all, Pax Nippocana, a world where Japan's economic gravity becomes so powerful it's the new sun in the international solar system.
But in the end, the report argued that the future wasn't going to be decided by politicians or generals. It would all come down to this one profound question. Are these two great nations, after a century of intense interaction, actually becoming more alike? Or is Japan's unique model of success proving they're on fundamentally different tracks? Whether these two societies are ultimately converging or drifting apart, that was, and it probably still is, the question that will define everything.